Hey, good evening and welcome to FCA's Mental Health and Wellness webinar. We are excited to be partnered with Breakthroughs of North Florida. My name is Andrew Baker. I am the Area Director for FCA in Nassau and Baker County. And we have come into a partnership with Breakthroughs of North Florida based out of the Yulee office. And just excited to have this partnership and be able to offer this to you all. Tonight, we're going to have Marty Edwards with us, who is the founder of Breakthroughs. She is a licensed marriage and family counselor, a former educator and teacher, and started Breakthroughs of North Florida with her husband after spending some time overseas doing counseling after getting out of education. With her will be Clint Connor, who works with Breakthroughs as a mentor and also works for the Department of Children and Families and is in the process of getting his license for marriage and family counseling as well. So it's our desire tonight for you all to interact with us, for us to be able to interact with you through the comments on YouTube, and be able to comment when something's relevant to you, to be able to say when you have a question and be able to answer that a little bit more timely. We will have a question and answer session at the end, but feel free to put something in the comments if you're willing to, or if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can go to our website at NE Florida Northeast, NE Florida FCA.org, and it's on the screen as well, /webinar. And if you can submit those by 8 p.m., we will get all of those answered that we can within that 30-minute time frame that we've designated. So Marty, Clint, I'm going to pass it to you all. Excited to have y'all with us, and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. We're so glad you could join us tonight. Clint and I are really excited about the opportunity to do this. We wanted to talk about topics that I'm sure that you hear a lot about, whether it's television or just talking with friends. We hear a lot about anxiety, depression, fear, isolation, lack of motivation, like how do we cope with all of that? And so we did our best tonight to not just give you things that you've probably heard before, but to really pull out some things that might be either new to you or some things that we can really talk about that it is personal and that will be of great help to you. So in thinking about that, what I see is that there seems to be a line, and unfortunately that line is invisible. Because when we're talking about anyone really, but especially teenagers, adolescents, is, what is quote unquote normal behavior, for a teenager? Because we all know that, their brains are still developing, their hormones are changing and developing as well. And so, how much of it is just typical teenage behavior, and when do we know that it has crossed over that invisible line to when we talk about actually having anxiety or really being depressed? And so I think for many teachers, parents, coaches, it's difficult to know what is typical and what is a little more than that needs to be addressed. So we hope that through these topics that we talk about tonight, that you will gain some new insight into when we've crossed over that invisible line.
And I think everyone can attest to having some sort of change in the past 8 months with the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. You go from a normal routine that you've become accustomed to for years to, like myself, working in an office with hundreds of people and communicating daily in person, to going to working from home. And it has a tremendous impact that myself, not being too familiar with mental health issues, became very real. And, for me personally, in a couple of aspects. And we'll talk a little bit about those tonight, and about what, COVID-19 how it's affected us, and all the changes we've made. And I know lots of athletes have lost their schedules have fallen apart with the loss of being able to play sports and to practice and to be with friends, all the things that you like to do. So we'll get into a little bit more about those specifically. But mental health in the past, and it seems like in the past 10 years, has just come to the forefront of you see it every day on the news, and you hear about people suffering from mental health issues. And it really is, something that is, as important as taking care of your physical health. And, we can't stress it enough, but this will be a really general overview of some of these issues. And, what we'll talk about is just kind of scratching the surface. But we do want to, make it very easy to talk about. That's one of the things that we have Marty and I have talked about before, was we really hope that, we can talk about this, about, our health mentally, just as well as we can talking about, having COVID-19 or having a cold or the flu. It really is a part of your overall well-being, and it's really very important. So we want to stress that. So we'll get into just some topics tonight, starting off with anxiety.
Yeah, and as you see these different slides, we just kind of wanted you to have something that would kind of spark your brains just to get it going, just on some different ideas and topics. So like we said initially, the slides that you're going to see are nothing earth-shattering as far as new information. We are sure that you have seen these things before. We do hope to pull in some new things. And we would encourage you to, if you have questions or comments, we would truly love to hear them. One of the reasons that I asked Clint to do this and do it with me, and we could be partners in this, is because we have different perspectives. We come down to the same issues, but I thought it would be good to have two different, for one, have male, female, and then introvert, yeah. Extrovert. Exactly. And so because it affects us different ways, and sometimes, especially with symptoms, they look different in different types of personalities and different types of people. So that's why I thought it would be a good idea to have kind of both sides to be able to share some personal things and express some different views on this. So one of the first ones that we were going to talk about was anxiety. And so there again, when you see the things that you're used to, feeling nervous, having a sense of danger, we think about, breathing fast, sweating, trembling, all of those different things, having trouble sleeping. And we can address any questions that you have with this. But some of the things that you may not think of would be things like irritability. A lot of times we just write it off as, well, he's just being a teenager, or she's just, she's at that age. And some of that is true. Some of that, it doesn't mean that if you see a student or one of your athletes is having some of these symptoms, that it couldn't just be age related. However, especially in today's world, we do need to be vigilant in watching our children and looking out for these different symptoms. With the irritability, that too can come in a variety of ways. One thing that is super important when a person is having anxiety is to acknowledge whatever it is that they're feeling. Our natural tendency with anxiety, whether it's ourselves or especially if you're trying to help someone that may be having what we might call a panic attack, or breathing, their rapid breathing, as we say, it's okay, really, yeah. Like, look around, everything's okay, everything's going to be okay. And in all honesty, that's probably I hate to say one of the worst things that you can say to a person that is experiencing anxiety is to tell them that everything is going to be okay. Because what our brain is trying to tell us when that is happening is that we are in danger. So the more someone tells us everything is going to be okay, or even if we try to tell ourselves that, our brain kicks into overdrive. And that's why we are usually the heart rate even goes up even more. And so the way that we get around that is to actually acknowledge what are the feelings you're having. We would call this mindfulness in the sense that you're literally having the person describe what it is they're feeling. And they may not even be able to tell you right away, and you want them to be mindful. Okay, what are you feeling in your hands? You know, are you sweating? Are they clammy? And so what happens is they begin to think about, okay, what really is going on with me physically? And it kind of gets their mind off of what it is that they're fearful about or what they're having anxiety about. So immediately you have a mind switch of, okay, what is going on physically? And so you want to go through literally the whole body from head to toe in what are you feeling? And so that is a good way to begin to get their mind shifted away from the anxiety, and then to let them acknowledge, you know, I understand what you're telling me, that your hands are sweaty. So you're not trying to tell them that everything is okay. We know that everything is probably okay, but that's not the best way to deal with it.
Yeah, it's like telling I have a 4-year-old son, and it would be like him, you know, having what we might call a meltdown, and me telling him to just calm down for no reason. You want to figure out why he's upset. You know, it's sort of the same theory as you don't want to just force someone to believe they're okay when there's obviously something wrong. So.
Yeah. So, and like I said, if you have any questions about any of that, please let us know. Some of the others, definitely having difficulty controlling the worry. There's so much for our kids today when, you know, with school and sports and trying to be good at everything that they're doing. And then you mix in a pandemic in the middle of all that, and there's truly so much to worry about. And so really being mindful in what is going on with your child, your athlete, your students, you know, whoever it is that you're in contact with. So make yourself knowledgeable about what anxiety truly is and some of the symptoms. And these are not exhaustive. There are others, but these are some of the ones that you would probably notice either in yourself or in the people that you are around.
And I know definitely I've heard of people with anxiety having, you know, physical ailments, you know, becoming sick quite a bit. One of the bullet points there in their symptoms is GI problems. And if that's recurring, and you know there's something wrong, you know, you have to get down and drill down to what the root cause is. That, you know, it may not be something you're eating, you may just be anxious without actually recognizing it. So definitely lots of things, like Marty said, that aren't on this list, but when it comes down to finding at what point something changed, where's that line for yourself and where's that line for others? It's definitely something you have to ask yourself, for yourself and for others. You know, you have to be very attentive to other people's regular behaviors, especially your close friends and family. If you're on a team, you know, your teammates and coaches. It's very important to have good relationships, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But you know, pay attention to people's behaviors, and it may mean something deeper than, you know, just having a bad day.
Yeah. So. And one way you can do that is if you're wondering, okay, is somebody just having a bad day, a hard day, or is this something that maybe I should be more concerned about? One of the ways that you can try to discover that is look for patterns. are there patterns with the person that you are seeing, or there again with yourself, that you're noticing that, you know, every time it's time to have practice, or every time that maybe you're supposed to have practice, but it's been canceled, or, you know, just looking for patterns. And so that is a good way. And if you notice a pattern, something that is happening, you know, before or after something, and the symptoms are continuously happening after certain things happen, then yes, it probably more is along the lines of anxiety, and something that does need additional help for sure. So, did you have anything else on anxiety?
I don't think so.
One thing, I'm sorry.
No,
one thing that I did think of is, especially, I'm not so sure about males, but females, hair falling out, like hair, just noticing. I mean, everybody's hair falls out, but if you're noticing like your child's excessive amounts of hair falling out, like in the shower or when you brush it, that is definitely a sign that something in the body is going on that can be caused by anxiety. So those are some of the ones that maybe you don't necessarily see on a PowerPoint, you know, or see or hear about on the news, but they are definitely things to look for. So the next one would be depression, which all of these kind of overlap and intertwine. They are not exclusive of one another. So we do want you to know that, even though they are on different slides. But depression is a word that sometimes we're like afraid to use, because it just seems so scary. It seems so taboo almost. You know, how do we know if we're just a child's having a bad day, a student's having a bad day, or, you know, are they truly depressed?
Yeah, I mean, even I keep going back to COVID-19 because that, you know, the pandemic has brought on so much, and you know, you can, like Marty's talking about, to, you know, have a schedule changed where, you know, something you're used to doing, you're not doing anymore, and you recognize that, oh, I'm feeling a little tense now that I'm having to do something different. That's something I know, just starting to work from home, I recognized in myself was I used to drive, 45 minutes to get to work, and that was sort of like a, decompress on the way to work and coming from work. So I recognized that, okay, I like to listen to music, I like to drive. It's something as simple as that, changing. So in the morning, now I take at least a 15-minute break when I can to go for a walk, or in the afternoon, listen to music on that, something I'm used to, that will take my mind off of some of these things and get me back into a routine. Because you definitely feel like, something is off. And that's sort of what we're talking about, is, recognizing these things in yourself, which is more difficult than it sounds, because you just, in the past 8 months, everyone just wants to kind of, keep the ball rolling and feel as normal as we can, when there may be something that we're not recognizing ourselves. And maybe like home life, maybe a little more tense, or, work may be a little less fulfilling than it used to be. So, all these things, like we're talking about, they all overlap and intertwine. But you definitely notice, it's definitely beneficial to notice when something is different in yourself and in others. But just some of the other things about depression that we're looking at. Reduced, I know I've talked to a few people who have asked, am I, you joke around about the word, and like Marty said, you hear it, it's just like, well, I'm depressed or whatever. But when you start getting into, to me, I've heard lots of physical ailments coming from this. One of the symptoms that it mentions is like reduced appetite or weight loss. And, I've heard that quite a bit. And I think people may just kind of try to brush it under the rug and say, oh, well, I've just been busy, everyone's busy, and, I have, my body's just adjusting or something like that. Well, it may be, the fact that, you have some sort of issue that you need to take care of. And it may not just be that you've, just had a slight change in your schedule or, your home life. It may be something that is, like Marty has said, is recurring. And you've crossed that line to where it's not just a bad day anymore. It's not just you had a fight with a friend at school, or you lashed out at an athlete, or one of your kids at home. It may be something a little more serious than just having a rough day or a rough week.
Yeah. And I think for some people, like, we were talking about depression kind of being a scary word, because I think so many people, especially, from what I see in counseling all day, every day, with adolescents and teenagers, is that it's, they equate it always with suicide. And depression can absolutely lead to that. And we've certainly seen that, all over and even in our county, which is so, so sad. But I think some people are scared to talk about it because they're afraid that if they talk about these symptoms, that someone's going to, think that that's, that they're having suicidal thoughts. And so we have to make it to where, people feel comfortable talking about depression, and that no one's going to, just immediately commit them somewhere. I've had, students tell me that before. Well, I didn't want to say anything because I was afraid that, I would be sent off, or I was afraid that, my parents would keep an eye on me 24/7, and I didn't, I still want my privacy. And so I didn't want to tell anybody. And so, I think if we begin to talk about depression, that there's a scale, that there's a spectrum, a scale. There's, it just because you are feeling down and even depressed, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to harm yourself. And that's good that you don't want to harm yourself, but it does still need to be dealt with, because there are many other things that can go along with that. And so, if you begin to notice that your student is not, or child or athlete is not as interested in the sport anymore, maybe is having trouble concentrating, not just on schoolwork, but having concentrating on lack of concentration with learning different plays, whether it's football or basketball. And they're just kind of, their brain, you feel like, where is their brain? And that can definitely be a sign of depression. The slowed thinking, speaking or body movements, like noticing that someone is moving slower than normal. I know even for myself, like when I begin to feel sad, I have a really hard time concentrating. And it's not even that I'm thinking about what I'm worried about. It's just that I have difficulty concentrating. I have trouble remembering things. I have trouble making decisions. And those are some things that we don't necessarily equate with depression. We think of depression as, well, I'm not depressed because I'm not laying in the bed all day. I'm a very hard worker. I work 5-6 days a week, from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, Monday through Friday. So how could I possibly be depressed, because I'm not laying in the bed. And so I think people view depression in that way, and that's not, it could be, but that's not necessarily true in all cases. It could be the loss of interest, or just lack of concentration and things like that. So hopefully, this is giving you a few more things to think about and broaden the way that you view depression and what it is and what the symptoms are.
Exactly.
So let's see, for time's sake, we'll keep going. We can always go back to any of these other topics, but let's move on down to fear.
Like Andrew said.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, that's fine. But I just want to reiterate, if you have questions during, you can always shoot them over in the comment section, and we'll get them covered while they're fresh in your mind. We don't want you to go away and say, oh, I was going to ask this, but now it's over. Or you can always, contact Andrew or Breakthroughs and get those questions answered. Don't feel like you need to walk away from tonight and say, I'll ask later, and then go ahead and ask because it's really important. So
Yeah.
But moving on to fear.
Yeah. So fear, I mean, the reason that we felt it was important to put fear in here is definitely because of the pandemic. And I can just say, personally, for things that I have experienced in my office in working with students is when we do hours of sessions, many times what it will boil down to, the parents might think, oh, well, they're depressed, or we're afraid they're on drugs, or we're afraid, all of these different things. And many times what it truly will boil down to is just fear. I worked with one student that she was withdrawing from friends. She used to be very involved in her youth group at church, and all of a sudden she didn't want to go to that anymore. And, the parents were just worried, like, what is going on? Does she have like a group of friends that we don't know about? Like, what is changing within her? Well, after working with her, after some time, what it boiled down to was that she was so fearful of catching COVID. And so at a very, very young age, she literally was pulling herself away from society because she'd heard so many scary things, on the news, people talking. And so she was so afraid of catching it that she was pulling away from everyone. And so it boiled down to fear, not depression, not some of the other things that you would initially think of.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge topic in the past eight months is, fear of going to the grocery store, fear of going back to work if you're, in a public setting. And again, fear, I mean, like it says, is a natural instinct for us, but when it becomes overwhelming and again, recurring, when you're afraid to, like this girl, when you're afraid to do things that are normal, and you start recognizing the fact that, wow, I'm not what I used to be. I think Marty and I were talking a couple of days ago, and you think back to 2019, and it seemed like such a great year compared to 2020. And you think about things you did, and I was in a conversation with someone at work, and we were talking about this, and it's like, wow, 2019 it seemed like a walk in the park. And then you start thinking about, comparing last year with this year, and holidays and, normal events that you normally, do during the year, birthday parties, holiday celebrations. And now we're kind of, shying away, which is good, stay healthy. But that, you don't want to let that fear like overwhelm you. We're taking precautions to stay healthy, and to keep those at risk healthy. But we don't need to let it drive us to, any of these other issues that are, just so important. So.
Yeah. And one thing that I would really like to point out is this is something that I see almost daily that kids tell me, young adults tell me, is that they see the stress on teachers' faces. They see the stress on, at their workplaces, sometimes with their coaches, and definitely their parents. And so what happens is that they don't express these fears, these feelings that they're having, because they don't want to put any more pressure or worry on the adult. And so they remain quiet. It may come out in other ways. They push it down because they don't want to put any more stress on the people that they love and care about. And so they hold it inside. So one thing, if I can encourage you to do anything from here on out with young people, is I would encourage you to be real with them and say, you know what? Yes, I do have extra stress. Yes, sometimes I'm fearful too, but I want you to know that I have very broad shoulders and that you can talk to me. You can come to me. It's not, when you talk to me, it's not going to cause more stress for me. I want to be here to help you. And so I don't want you to be fearful that if you tell me something that I'm not going to be able to handle it, or, I'm going to, it's going to create anxiety with me. So you need to make them feel very comfortable that, that you will be okay, that you will be able to handle it, and that you would much rather them tell you than try to protect you, if that makes any sense. And so you don't want to be dishonest with them. They need to know that it's okay to be fearful, that it's okay to have some anxiety and to even get down, that we get down too. But that doesn't mean that they can't come to you and talk to you about it, that it's not going to cause more stress for you.
Anything else?
I think, yeah. So, and you can see, we don't want to just read the slides to you, so you can see some of the symptoms. And of course, there's more. One thing, whether it's anxiety or fear, one thing that are things that you don't see would be like chewing, like the inside of your jaw. Like if you notice, if it looks like a person's almost chewing gum, but they don't have gum, they might be chewing the inside of their jaw. A lot of kids will pick at their fingernails. So yeah,
faces or anything really.
Yeah, hair, pulling little pieces of hair out, and so these are just things that you can look for. If you notice that a student's hands that they're just raw and almost bloody, at the what do you call that? Cuticle. I kept wanting to say Q-tip. On the cuticle. And so you can, just notice people's hands. And that sounds like such an odd thing, but, people's hands are something that we can easily see. And so, picking at hands, chewing up the jaw, pulling at little hairs anywhere on the body, but especially on the head. Those are all things that you can easily look for. Let's see. What are some good
questions
tools?
coming in?
Yeah. So one is, what are some good tools to use to reduce anxiety? One of the main ones that I was talking about was acknowledging it. But by not telling them, hey, don't worry about it, everything's going to be okay. See, everything's okay. I would discourage that. And so, so what do you put in its place? What you put in its place is help them be mindful. What is going on in their body? What is going on in their environment? And not in a judgmental way, but to just say, I feel this. And you always want to acknowledge and say, I hear you. You don't necessarily want to say, I understand, because a lot of times people will shut down when you say, I understand, because their initial thought is, no, you don't. You don't understand what I'm going through. You don't live in my house. You don't live in my head. So I would stay away from things like, I understand. Everything will be okay. Those are things that you want to stay away from. So you want to help them be mindful. What are things that they are physically feeling within their body? Get them to talk to you about what it is that they are fearful about, what it is that they are anxious about. And you know what? Sometimes people, it's hard for them to articulate that. Sometimes they're not even sure, what it is that they're having anxiety about. And so that's when it's good to actually talk about the physical symptoms. Okay, well then just tell me about what's going on in your body. What are you feeling right now? What's your heart doing? What's your hands doing? That kind of thing. And a lot of times once they calm down, they're able to then talk about it. So definitely encourage them to talk. So those would probably be the first tools, that I would have you use. There's always the ones that, I'm sure you've heard of, which is counting. And I always encourage people to count backwards, because you have to think harder to count backwards. Whereas, rather than just 1, 2, 3, 4, if you're counting from, 20 backwards or from 10 backwards, it involves more brain power. And so that can easily bring down that. And, like I said, of course, some of the things that Clint mentioned was, listening to music, going for a walk, all of those types of things.
Yeah. One thing I've learned to do with really in my everyday life, not even about these topics, is write things down. If you feel like Marty's talking about, if you feel like you know what you're afraid of, or if you know issues you're having, write them down, because you don't want to, let it go. What I've learned is about myself is if I don't write something down, I normally forget it. So I have a list for everything. And so when it comes to, something like acknowledging your fears, if you have a minute, if you're at work and you're thinking, man, I just really can't get over this one thing, most people have a phone right in front of them like we do. I have a notepad for everything. You can just take a note, come back to it later on, readdress the issue, and then think on it when you have more time. But just so you don't forget, we have technology that we can use as tools, and they're great. So make use of those if you can, and just so you don't forget, because it's easily forgotten.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that one, like actually writing things down that are bothering you. The reason that works very well is because what that tells the brain is when you take it from here to here, or the phone, what that does is that lets your brain know that I heard you. I heard what you are trying to tell me. And so a lot of times, if I'm having trouble sleeping, a lot of people come to me with having trouble sleeping. And so, I tell them, put a notepad beside your bed, have your phone, and this goes against what they tell you to do, but it works. Have your phone by your bed and have that notepad. And so if something keeps going through your mind, like, oh my goodness, I need to remember to do this. And oh man, I forgot to do that. And so what happens is the brain continuously tells you that because it's trying to protect you. It's trying to warn you. And so you write it down, or you tap it out on your phone, and you tell your brain, okay, you don't have to keep reminding me, I've got it. And so
that's great for students too. If you have a lot on your plate, you have exams coming up. I know a lot of school is online now. I know I'm taking college courses, and we have Canvas app, and there's others, and they have a calendar and a to-do list, and that's great. And if you need to make your own, like Marty said, once you can write something down and say, okay, I know that's there. I know I'm going to do this later. I won't forget. That just, it's calming.
Yeah. Or, okay, so let's do another one. So let's say that you're having a person that is having fear of catching COVID. The best thing that you can do for them is to actually talk about. You want to talk about it. You don't want to say, oh, your chances of getting it are very low, or don't worry about that. If you get it, you probably won't get very sick. Those types of comments are not helpful for people that truly are fearful of catching it. So the best thing that you can do is talk to them about, okay, so what would be like worst case scenario? So like if, okay, so you catch it. So if you catch it, what are you afraid? Are you afraid of, some may say, well, I'm afraid I won't be able to breathe. And so you talk, okay, so if you weren't able to breathe, then, we would definitely get you some help. We would go to the doctor. Like, you're not going to be alone in this, and so you kind of walk through those worst case scenarios. And you don't just want to say, well, oh, you'll be fine, And so actually talking about them. And when they tell you things that might shock us on the inside, don't let it show on the outside. As a parent, we might go like, oh my goodness, like, I can't believe my child just said that, but you don't want to show it on your face. You always just want to acknowledge. You're just acknowledging, okay, well, tell me about that. And so hopefully those are some good tools, and we can definitely talk about more tools to use, but hopefully that'll give you some to get started with. Another one of the questions was, who do you feel is best equipped to probe about their feelings? Parents, coaches, siblings, friends. Many times kids have a fear of seeing a counselor. That is a fantastic question. It really is. And that is a tough one. I would say whoever you think that the child or the teenager feels most comfortable with, and for that person to just be open and there again, not act shocked about the things that they say. If you do feel it is more serious, if that person trusts you, you can encourage, you know what, tell me what you think a counselor does. Tell me what you think a counseling session would be like, would look like. Okay, that's interesting. So why don't we go and let's see if that's what you thought that it was. And most kids will at least come once. I had a student today. I had a 15-year-old male that he was really nervous about coming in. He'd never been to a counselor. He, said that he thought, well, I must be, people are going to think I'm crazy. And the more that we talked, and he realized, that I was just a human. I was just a person that was a safe place for him to talk. He wants to come back, and I'm not saying that's the case with everyone, but there's certainly ways, to encourage it, which is, once again, not just saying, oh, it'll be fine, you'll love it, it'll be great. I mean, we don't know that, right? Mm-hmm. They may have a bad experience. We don't know. So we don't want to promise them something that we can't deliver on, but we can say, what do you think it would be like? What is it that makes it scary to you? Okay, let's just go see. Let's experiment. Let's do an experiment. Let's see if that's what you thought. And if that's what you were fearful of happens, then you know what? You don't have to go back. And so, but I would say best equipped, I guess it would just be whoever is with that student maybe the most, or that student trusted.
Yeah, I was thinking, some teachers and students have really good relationships. Coaches spend a lot of time with their teams. Anyone, sometimes more than parents, during the day. So anyone who your child trusts and talks to on a regular basis and opens up to, that's huge. And that's why it's so good to keep good relationships with for students, with your teachers, and with your coaches and friends. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and I think, and this is, I have not experienced this myself, but I think sometimes that an athlete is afraid to tell their coach, that they are having some issues because they're afraid that they won't play them, or that they'll think they're weak, and they want to look tough and strong. So, if the coach can make the team feel like that, hey, this is perfectly normal. Sometimes I am fearful, and just be a real person with them and make them feel like they can talk about anything and that there won't be repercussions, for that.
Right.
So this is great. Keep asking those questions. I hope. It's so hard not having feedback. I wish I could know if we have answered your questions well. If we haven't, keep asking. So for time's sake, let's talk a little bit about isolation. So isolation is something that, of course, has always been an issue with kids, with teenagers. I've always said you can be in a crowded room and still feel alone. And so sometimes we automatically equate isolation with, seeing someone sit in the room by themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's, yes, that is isolation as well, but it's not always the case. So we have to make sure that we recognize students who are not participating, maybe in the corner, not smiling, not joking around, just kind of being present, just kind of there. And so that's a little bit harder to detect, of course, but we definitely want to look out for those things with isolation. And with COVID, I mean,
that's been a really big issue. And I think most of the local counties are back to going back to on-campus schooling. I think with the option of virtual, but I mean, I've had conversations with people at work with kids that were in school and having to homeschool and, do virtual school. You really don't think about it. We were talking earlier about people working from home like myself. It seemed really like a good idea. I'll get to work from home. I don't have to drive to work anymore. I don't have to spend so much money on gas, and we can say everything good about it. But even like Marty mentioned earlier, being an introvert, that seemed like the perfect scenario for me.
You were excited about it.
It seems so good. I don't have to talk to many people. But what I learned about myself was I went from communicating all day at work to people in an office and doing most of my communication in person and on the telephone. And we just immediately, mid-March, went from that to working from home. And lots of students went from, being at school to working or doing school at home and virtually. And, you really never see it coming. But, a few months into that, you start thinking, man, it's kind of depressing. We use that word, but it'll take you to a place where you just checked out.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah. And I just, I really believe that, that God made us to need each other, to be with others. That's just the way he designed us. And so, yes, I mean, we all have different personalities. And it doesn't matter what type of personality you have. We all need, human contact, human interaction. And so the pandemic has clearly made that difficult, but, there are ways, around it and different things, that we can do.
I mean, just for instance, I went from emailing, when I went to using telephone. It's something as simple as, email and text messaging seems really convenient. Most of the time, not to talk to someone, you don't have to bother someone. But the aspect of actually talking to a human being in person or over the telephone, hearing someone's voice, that's huge. When you don't talk to anyone at home, you spend hours at home alone. When you're used to communicating with people in person, it really will affect you, and I can testify to that. I went from working in a small office at home to I said, hey, I've got to get out of this small office in the back of my house where I don't have a view. I'm not talking to anyone, to working by the window up front and using the telephone quite a bit. So just something as simple as recognizing the fact that your routines are being altered for some reason, like a pandemic, or changing from in person to working at home or schooling at home, they have a huge impact. And I'm sure some parents noticed some changes in their kids when they're working at home virtually and spending lots of time maybe in their bedroom, which is really tough on humans. So to be in a enclosed space for a very long time, I think there's probably a reason we use that as a form of punishment. So
yeah. And there again, so what do we do about that? Mm-hmm. Honestly, I mean, we just do the best we can, and you just continue to encourage the actual voice, whether it, because I mean, everybody's about texting, the kids are about texting, which is fine, but encourage them to call the friend, to talk, to do the Skype or the FaceTime, things like that. If you can get together in, of course, very small groups and be able to socially distance, but at least see each other, anything that you can encourage your students, your athletes, your kids to do. But it is very difficult. I mean, having to choose between, safety, physical safety, and of course, mental health issues, that come from isolation. And, even just the mask. I mean, when even going in a grocery store and you can't see anybody smile, You can't see the facial expressions really. It's sad. It's a very, you know, lonely feeling when you can't even really smile at anyone. You can't see anybody smile back at you. So there's so many issues going on right now that everybody knows about. I mean, we're not telling you anything new, but to just hang in there and keep encouraging your students and your children to do the little bit that they can. Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just one more, I think there's one more slide, which is really an effect of these issues is lack of motivation. Like Marty's talking about, you know, we experience these things and you start, you know, wondering why I don't want to do what I normally like to do. And a friend at work actually reminded me, like I was saying earlier, about, think about 2019 and, you know, what I was doing last year this time. And, you know, I've heard of some people who, you know, aren't, something simple as you just aren't motivated enough to, you know, set up Christmas decorations, or they're not getting into the Christmas spirit, you know, because everything has affected everything they do and their mindset, and they're afraid of, you know, what COVID-19 may bring, or what the health of, you know, their relatives or anyone, like, you know, close to them that are at risk. And it really just brings, you know, this fog. And, you know, lack of motivation is one of those things that is it may not be obvious to you about yourself, but you can see that quite a bit in others. Like we've been talking about with your kids at home, and they, you know, they don't want to be involved, and they don't want to do what they normally do. You know, it's just one of those things that the first bullet point, like I was talking about earlier, I had to make myself, you know, go outside and go for a walk, and actually set, you know, technology is great most of the time. One of the things I've done is set an alarm for twice a day, just to make myself stop, go outside if the weather's nice, walk, you know, go for a bike ride or something, just to break up the monotony. Because otherwise you get lost in what you're doing, and, you know, you just lose sight of the end and what you're doing, and everything good that's gonna come from what you're doing, whether it be school or work. You just get into this routine that is, you know, just kind of bland and dull, and you can't enjoy. So anything else?
Yeah, and one thing that you can do for your students is the last bullet there. If you'll look at that one, set achievable goals and allow yourself satisfaction in achieving them. So, you know, if you notice that someone is really struggling with motivation, just a very small goal, just any little thing, and celebrate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, no matter how small it is, and see if you can encourage your children, your students, your athletes, you know, to just have just small, achievable goals that are realistic, and celebrate with them, no matter what it is. Just continue to encourage. And I know it's hard because we as teachers and administrators and coaches, and, you know, we get down ourselves, and it's all we can do to be motivated. But any little bit of encouragement that you can give to your students, and helping them create small goals, you know, for themselves, whether it's for that day or for that week, and then check in with them. Hey, how did you, you know, you set a goal, you know, that you were going to ride your bike this week, or that you were going to call your friend, you know, rather than text them, you know, like that was your goal for that day or that week, and check back with them. You know, did you do that? How did it go? How did it feel to actually hear their voice? How did it feel when you felt the wind in your face? You know, just little things like that, and getting them to talk about it.
Right. Well, in closing, I guess we'll go to the last slide there. Lots of things how to cope. These are really just a lot of things we've already talked about, and like Marty mentioned, you know, these are really just sort of the basics that you can look up in a quick web search that we want to get out there and put out there to you to look at while we're communicating some other things. But look at these, and you can, I think request a copy of this slideshow if you'd like. Do your own research, but just make sure you're aware of yourself and others and how people are feeling. I know it's been a rough 8 months, and even without COVID, we really should be caring about others and ourselves, number one, because if you don't take care of yourself, it's really difficult to take care of others. But be mindful, like Marty said, of yourself and how you're feeling, and the routines that you've broken, you've got out of, that you miss. Sometimes I joke around and say, oh, I miss going to the beach, or I miss doing this or that. Well, ask yourself, follow up with yourself. Why don't I do that anymore? What happened? And try to get back into routines of things that you are familiar with and that make you happy, even if it's just for a few minutes a day. It may do a world of good. So,
yeah. Now, one of the things I've noticed, and we talked about this a little bit tonight, but that I've noticed with my clients that come in is just that, everything is so different now. They're, whether it's we're going to dance or karate or we stay so busy now. It's not just school. It's school, then sports, then karate, then piano lessons. Then we've become a society, where we're just so, like, every minute of the day until we lay our head down on a pillow, we're so used to doing something, and that's so typical, for all students, most families. And so when all of that is just literally like ripped away from you, like a Band-Aid, just gone, that is so difficult. And so one of the tools that you can use, or one of the things that you can use for that, is create some new routines, create almost a new normal, in knowing that, okay, so we will get back to the sports, we will get back to the karate, we will get back to, and we already are back to some of that, but to, just some fun things. Every moment doesn't have to be filled up, but, make Thursday night milkshake and movie night, and just keep that a routine. Like every Thursday night, that's what you do. Every Monday, whatever works for you and your schedules, but come up with a new normal, a new routine. And you can do that as teachers, you can do that as coaches, it doesn't just have to be in the home, and make some of it, fun, make some of it things that the kids are really going to enjoy.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have something to look forward to. So if it's, if you have, like Marty said, a 1 week night where you do something special, something to look forward to.
Yeah, and one of the bullets that I like the most on this one is to welcome humor. Anytime you can laugh, that is one of the most healing things. So whether it's watching a funny movie, or just telling silly jokes, just anything to get, someone to laugh is very helpful in coping. And then, of course, any type of exercise. And like I said, those are the ones that you hear all the time, get plenty of exercise. And we didn't want to not bore you with you guys, but we know you've heard of those. So we were just trying to think of some different things to really talk about that you could do with new routines and the humor. And then, of course, learning your triggers. What are those patterns? What are those things that are causing the anxiety? And learn to work on those. And then, of course, one of the main things is definitely talk to someone. And so it is hard to know sometimes who would be the best person to do that. But I think that's really more of an individual, thing, because everybody is so different, whether that's a parent, a teacher, coach, a friend. And you can always start with a friend, and get some idea of how serious it is, and then go from there.
Yeah. I think is there one more slide? Closing, I think. Just for the sake of time, we'll just end it pretty quickly. But one thing, that says don't self-diagnose, we're talking about, you have to, find that line for when you actually have something you need to see a professional about. So some of the other things that I have on there is strive for good relationships and communication. All these are so key. I mean, we talk about these on a regular basis with encouragement, things like that. But having good relationships and open communication with, spouses and children and coaches and teachers, it makes it so much easier to recognize these symptoms and to be able to ask if there's something going on. If you're a coach or a student, whatever the case may be, getting along with people and being able to talk to them, is great for, leading up to, hey, what's going on? You missed practice a couple of times last week, or you called out sick, dad or mom, or whatever, a couple of weeks ago, and now you're doing it again. There's something going on. You can't stress the value of good relationships with those you're closest to. So, and next to the last, be personal with those you're close to. Not that you're not telling you to be nosy, don't get too personal, maybe, but be personal enough that you feel comfortable asking your siblings or parents or coaches or teachers for some help, or with questions you may have about some of these symptoms we're talking about. But I told Marty earlier, I said, we could go in the last bullet point there. There's so much science behind the things we're talking about, and we could get into a much longer webinar about these things. But even if you don't understand the science, and I'm not a professional myself when it comes to the science aspect of it, but it is worth asking somebody about. It's not worth sitting on and and just saying, okay, I'll be okay. Just let time will heal. Well, it may not. You may need to talk to someone about it. So that's what we're here for, is for you to talk to someone about it. And another thing is, a lot of us here are believers. We put our faith in Jesus and God, and He's much higher than we are, and He understands these things, and He created all of these different characteristics about ourselves, and designed our bodies to be able to know what's good and what's not. And we live in a world that says there's so much bad, and it's a lot of times it drives us to some of these issues. But one thing, I was talking to a friend at work about this, and he asked a question. It's like, I just feel like I've lost my faith because I have these issues. And these issues aren't a faith issue. You don't lose your faith because you may be you may have some anxiety, or you may feel like you're depressed, or be diagnosed with depression. It's not at all on your part of like a lack of faith. It's kind of like being tempted doesn't mean you're going to fall to that temptation. This may just be a test of your faith, and to get through. And that's what people like Marty are there for, is to help you get through this, and to be healthy overall, and to just be in your right mind and fulfill your purpose in life, and not let anything drag you down, and not let these issues hinder you from doing what God created you to do. We have so many encouragements in Scripture. Jesus said, I've overcome the world. Do not fear. It doesn't mean that we can't be tempted to fear, because you want, of course, the enemy wants you to fail. But you're not created to take on that all by yourself. So that's where we're encouraging you to get some help. And like Marty said, it may just start with talking to a friend. But if you get to that point where you feel like you do need more help than maybe what a friend can offer, that's when breakthroughs or counseling agencies are there for you. They want to help you.
And
go ahead.
No, and I would like to close just by saying, I would encourage each of you that are listening tonight, if you can do anything, I would beg you to please talk about mental health. That doesn't mean that you have to know everything about it, or you may feel like, well, I don't, like I'm not an expert, like how am I going to talk about it? just talk, that it's okay to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
because we all know that the more something is talked about, the more normal it becomes. I mean, my goodness, we see that in movies. We see that on television. Mm-hmm. We see that in this world of, years ago, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, things that we see on TV now, like we would have never seen back then. And now it's like no big deal. So that just proves that the more that something is in our face, the more that it just becomes familiar. And that is my hope and prayer for the topic of mental health, that we can get rid of the stigma that goes along with it, that it's no different than talking about having a headache or a stomach ache or having diabetes, or anything like that. I mean, nobody talks about diabetes and goes, oh, we don't do that. So why do we do that with mental health? And so the more, I'm sure that everybody that's listening is probably a coach, a teacher, a parent, and you have so much influence to be able to let others know, especially young people, that it's okay to talk about mental health.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all we have. We'll turn it back over to Andrew. Andrew, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I just want to share 3 pretty simple truths with everybody as we close from FCA's perspective before we jump into the Q&A time. 3 simple truths and a question that we would have everybody ask themselves. The first truth, and FCA calls this the 4, represented by these 4 symbols. The first truth is that God loves us, and He loves each of us in a very personal way. We are, Genesis 1:27-28 says that we are created in His image, and we're created with a purpose. And each of those purposes are different. But He loves us enough to uniquely make us, but also put His image on us. The problem that we have in the second symbol of the division is that sin separates us. Sin separates us from God. The wrongdoing that we do each and every day is just something that creates a division in that relationship. And Romans 3:23 tells us that all of us have fallen short of God's glory, and that sin and wrongdoing in our life is and in the world is what has created a lot of these issues that we've talked about. And it's what keeps us from experiencing creation the way that it was intended to be, the relationships the way that they were intended to be, and just life the way that it was intended to be. Romans 6:23 tells us that our sin has to be paid for by death. But it finishes by saying that it's a free gift of God, that Christ Jesus is where we can find eternal life because He has taken that death for us. And so while the sin separates us from God, it doesn't change that God still loves us deeply and uniquely. And because of that, He sent Jesus to rescue us. And that's the cross symbol. John 3:16 tells us that God loved the world so much that He sent His Son so that we could have eternal life. And I hate that so many people separate 3:16 from 3:17. That John 3:17 assures us that Jesus didn't come to condemn us, and a lot of times that's what we feel is just condemning from the church. But He didn't come to condemn us, but He came to save us from our sins, because He wants what is so much better for us. Peter, one of Jesus's closest followers while He was alive, writes in 1 Peter 3:18 that Christ suffered once for sins, that He would be the reason that we are brought to God, and that we get to be in relationship with Him for eternity. So the question that all of us have to ask ourselves, and I have to ask myself daily, is will I trust Jesus? Will I make that choice to trust Jesus that what he says in his word is true, and that's the way that I will strive to live and follow after him in that. If you've never trusted Jesus before and want to make that choice, it's as simple as confessing that we're in need of a Savior, and that we have sinned and need Jesus to rescue us. And maybe there's some people that are listening that would say, hey, I've trusted, but I've kind of fallen away. And it's as easy as just turning back to him and praying to him. And to me, that's a very personal conversation, but it could go something like this. Jesus, I believe that you are God and have forgiven all of my sins by dying and coming back to life again for me. I trust you and ask you to be the Lord of my life, and I surrender my life to you. You are God, my Savior and my Lord. Let me experience your love and your good plans for my life. Amen. If you've made a decision to trust Jesus through this webinar, if you want to answer that question of will you trust Jesus? Yes. Then you can text FCA 1631 to the number 46322. And FCA's put together a package of resources that would be texted to you. Some professional athletes that care about seeing coaches and athletes' lives being transformed and want to help along in that process in those next steps as you start the journey of being a Christ follower. So before we get to a couple questions that have come in, want to make sure that everybody knows that we will have a second webinar on January the 26th. More details will come to follow that, but wanted to at least let everybody know to save the date. And this is something that we want to create a series of. And so if you have a suggested topic, you can go back to the website, northeastfloridafca.org/webinar. And the link to submit your question has now changed into a link to submit your webinar theme idea. We would love to be able to serve you in that way if we can. So please let us know topics that you feel would be relevant to your life as a coach, an athlete, as a parent of an athlete, anything like that. And then Clint mentioned this slideshow will be available to download on our website tomorrow. So anybody who wants these slides, feel free to head to the website and you can pick those up tomorrow. Clint and Marty, I will have you guys jump back in with me real quick. Two questions came in basically wanting to know the same thing. And it's saying, do you have any suggestions for me as a coach to do with my whole team to open communication lines so we can build a safe environment and discuss mental health?
Wow.
Good question.
I know that is, and I applaud whoever this coach is. That is fantastic that you are thinking in that way. Right off the top of my head, like for the whole team, I probably, if it's okay to have some time to because I'm not used to thinking like whole team, but it's needed and it's amazing. So if I could maybe, Andrew, like have tonight and tomorrow, maybe a little bit of time to think of like whole team and maybe give some suggestions. But for tonight, I would probably say having an intentional conversation with the whole team about mental health. And the cool thing about that is that everyone at this point has been affected. by the pandemic in some way or another. I'm sure there will have even been some students that have lost someone very close to them, or at least someone they know. And so you're really, I would say to this coach, that you're coming in to a dialogue with an audience that I think is ready to listen, which is wonderful, because that is a very hard age. Everything is kind of funny or silly, or we don't want to act like we really care about it, because then we wouldn't look cool in front of our friends. And so I think because this is something that has been going on for so long, and I'm sure it's affected everyone, that I truly believe that you're coming into it at a good time to have a dialogue and to say, okay, this is something that I am putting out there because it is important to me as a coach. And if you have that type of relationship, which I'm sure you do, even by asking this question, that you are a coach that has a really wonderful relationship with your team, that they respect you. And so once again, anything that you deem as super important to you and to your life, and that will help the team as a whole, it helps them individually, but then it also helps them as a whole. So going from, from micro to macro, and helping them understand that concept, that as a team, when we are as healthy as we can possibly be physically and mentally, then we work much better together as a team. I mean, you could relate it to, that's why we work out in the gym. That's why we have weight training. That's why we have, because individually you have to work on your muscles. Individually, you have to work on your endurance. Individually, you have to work on your skills. And so even though it may be a team sport, we all have to work on ourselves individually in order to make a really strong team and to work together. So you could fit in the mental health as part of what you have to work on individually, so that we can be super strong as a team, and we can win, and we can be a good example. And so what I'll work on later for you is, what types of topics, or how can we approach what it is that they need to do individually. But I think that would be a good starting point for
Great.
you.
Yeah. So maybe to dive into it, maybe a little bit more of an individual level. A coach of a male sport is asking, where some of these topics are seen as a weakness for male athletes, or just males in general. How can they encourage vulnerability?
Yeah. I would share some stories and some examples. Be real as a coach, in the sense that you are going to share some vulnerabilities that you have as a male, as a man. That, yes, I mean, of course, we want to be strong, but here I am, and I'm speaking from the coach side. Here I am as a coach, as a male. I'm sharing with you that it's okay, to share and show vulnerability. Probably one of the best examples would be to share about Jesus, and how, he's truly the best example that we have. And, to share about his life and the times, throughout, his time here on earth, how he made himself vulnerable. How he would show his emotions. He showed anger, he showed tears. And so he got to people not by being tough. When we think of Jesus, we don't think of Jesus as being Mr. Muscle, tough guy. Maybe he was, I don't know. But that's not what we read about in scripture. And so to share, with your team, the best example that anybody could ever have is that Jesus was definitely vulnerable. And look at how many people and how many lives he's affected over, many, many years by being vulnerable. So, definitely Jesus, and then personal, how can we expect our team, how can we expect our players to be vulnerable if we're not willing to show that to them personally? And then, of course, other examples, maybe of some other athletes, maybe that they admire and know about, and some real life stories, for them.
Yeah, I was going to say be personal, because I've learned that just in talking to some friends of mine about, this year in general. We love outdoors, camping. I love survival skills, learn that sort of thing. And I learned real quick that some of these issues we're talking about are much more difficult than surviving in a jungle for a week or something like that, like you see on TV. They're not as easy to overcome as you might think. So like Marty said, just get that ball rolling and the conversation started, and the more people understand that this is not just getting over a cold. This is a much different healing process than a physical sickness.
Yeah.
So it's sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and two, this is okay, Coach, this is critical. So here's the deal. So if you are saying to your players that it is not only okay to be vulnerable, but it is a good thing. It is a good thing to, not necessarily on the field, but, to be real, to be vulnerable in front of your teammates and in front of your friends and in front of myself. If you're telling them that, then you have 100%, you have got to stand behind that, in the sense that if you begin to see or hear about any bullying, or, if there's people that begin to make fun of, because somebody's got to be first, right? I mean, yeah. Somebody's got to step out of the box and say, okay, I'm stepping out on a limb here. And that alone is very scary and makes you feel vulnerable, like you have no skin. And so you have to make sure that you support that, in the sense that you absolutely will not tolerate anyone making fun of someone who's trying to be real, trying to be vulnerable, because if you allow that at all, you've lost it. I mean, you've lost the trust, and of course, no one else is going to follow suit. I mean, no one's going to follow their lead if they see, oh my goodness, this person showed some real emotion, and now they're the laughing stock of the team. Like, there's no way I'm stepping out. So you've got to make sure, you've got to be physically and mentally prepared that you will not let that happen.
Good. No, I love the thought of, if I as a coach can't be vulnerable, why would my players even consider being vulnerable themselves? So that's a good thought right there.
Yeah. Or if I allow.
Yeah. And that critical piece. Yeah. Another question that came in, what should I do if I suspect someone is depressed or has high anxiety? And as a follow-up in that, when do I know that I've kind of reached my limit and of all of I can do, and they need to seek some help?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So it's hard for us, especially when you're talking about students, and it's not like our personal family. It's not our child. Sometimes we feel like, well, am I stepping over a line? Okay, so I'll just say, hey, how you doing today? Oh, I'm good. Okay, good. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad they didn't say anything, because I wouldn't really know what to do. So if you really suspect something, there again, talking about vulnerability, you've got to make yourself available, vulnerable, and to go a little further, with it, in the sense that, hey, Clint, I've noticed that you haven't smiled a lot today, or you haven't smiled a lot. So be specific. It's really easy. I mean, oh my goodness, even at church, how many of us, hey, how you doing today? I'm great, man. I'm great. I mean, we all say that just in passing. And so don't make it that easy for someone to be able to just say, I'm good. I'm good. So ask them very specific questions like, hey, I've noticed that you haven't been smiling much this week. And stop. Like, you don't have to keep talking. And so just stop with that. I've noticed that you haven't been smiling much this week.
I think what you'll find too is just in personal experience, if you are willing to give someone your time, they will talk to you. If you don't just say, like Marty says, hey, how you doing? I'm good. And how are you? Good. Go separate ways. If you stop and talk to someone, be personal, like I talked about earlier, you'll get a response. And you may not know all the answers, but now you know the direction that need to be led.
Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah. And what they say to you will determine, where you need to go with that. If they say to you, well, I lost my, somebody that was close to me, and now what's the point of living? I mean, if they make a comment, and sometimes people will, if they make that type of comment to you, then there again, don't act shocked. Oh my goodness. Like, don't act all nervous. Just say, okay, can you tell me a little bit more about that? And the thing that you have to remember as a teacher, parent, coach, it's okay that you don't have the answer. I think that's why so many times we are scared to really delve into someone's life, because we think, I'm not going to know what to do, and so we stop and we don't want to go any further. But it's okay to not know what to do. We can help find the answers, and you can tell that person, you know what, I don't know what to tell you about that right now, but I can tell you this: I'm here, and I will help you get any help that you need, even if I don't know the answers. And so that takes the pressure off of whoever it is that's trying to help.
That's great. That's great. Last question that we can finish up with is, with sports coaches and athletes, they thrive off of schedules and routines and trainings. And even just this week, we've seen, I guess going back into last week, the Ravens and Steelers were supposed to play on Thursday, and it got moved to Sunday, it got moved to Tuesday, and now it's moved to Wednesday. So the NFL had schedule change by the minute, it seemed. And the same types of things are going on in high school as well. What is the best or just a few ways, and I know you hit on some ways to cope with these things, but what's the best or a few ways to handle those disruptions, and somebody who's not in an anxious state or depressed state to keep from falling into those?
I think that, with since our audience is coaches and teachers and parents and athletes, I mean, we have to say it to ourselves as well, but we have to make sure that the people that we're dealing with, those students, that we continuously let them know that it's okay to be mad about it. It's okay to be frustrated. So you're not telling them you shouldn't feel that way. You never want to tell somebody what they should or should not be feeling. And so let them talk about it, let them be real with it. Yes, that makes me very frustrated too. What can we do to get through this? What can we do to get past this? Try to allow yourself to get over the initial shock, the initial anger, the initial frustration, because it's a process, with our minds. Like we have to allow ourselves to go through any type of thoughts and mental things that are going on with us when something happens. And so it's okay to allow our bodies and our brains to process the information and then talk about it. You know, if someone's really angry about, like, for example, I had a client today that was really angry because he was now going to have to quarantine because he was around somebody. He's a very social person, and he was around somebody for just a few seconds, but now the school is making him quarantine, and he was really, really angry about it. So don't try to explain it away when someone's angry. Like, let them be angry about it. Let them go through that process. And as they calm down, then begin, to talk about it. Tell me what you're feeling. Talk to me about the things that you're going to miss. Okay, if those are the things you're going to miss, let's talk about some ways that we can maybe do it differently. Like, how, you know what I'm saying? Like, how can we work with this? But don't try to do it when they're super upset or frustrated or angry. Like, allow that time.
Great.
Did I answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. You answered it for me.
Okay.
Hopefully everybody else felt like it was answered. I will say I've just been told that the slideshow is actually downloadable now. So anybody who would like to go download it can go download that now from our website. But just want to thank you all again for joining us, for partnering with us in this, and providing the information that you did. As experts, FCA is no expert in this. We'd love to have conversations with people, but when it comes to professional help, we're definitely going to pass to other people, and thankful that Breakthroughs exists to help people through issues like this. So let me pray for us as we finish up, and we'll close it out. So, Heavenly Father, we love you. We thank you for your goodness and the goodness that you want for us. And that looks differently. You don't promise that it's going to be perfect for any of us, but you give us trials to prune us and to sharpen us, to grow us, to become more like you. You created us in your image, and you're continually molding us to be more like you, and we are thankful for that. It's not always easy in the moment. We don't always have the right answers. We don't always know how we're supposed to be or act. But I pray that we would lean into you, trust you, and continue to seek you in all of these circumstances, and that our anxiety, depression, our fears, our isolation, that we know that those aren't final, and that you have called us into a relationship with you, and you will make this world perfect again one day. And that's where our hope is, and that we would continually place our hope there and look to that perfection where these issues are in the past for everyone. But we love you. We pray that we would just glorify you in all that we do. It's in your name I pray. Amen. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a wonderful night.